Shivay.
Shivay. Okay. All right, and we're live. Welcome to another episode of ChatLoopBackOff, CrashLoopBackOff. I don't know. We have so many names
Yeah.
for these things. Shivay, take us away. The hour is yours.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So let me share my screen. Right, perfect. Fields should be visible. Yep, perfect. All right. So, first of all, thank you so much, Herd, for uh, giving that quick introduction. A quick introduction about myself as well. I'm Shivay, and I'm a CNCF Ambassador. I work at Couchbase as a developer experience engineer, and I've been previously a maintainer for projects like Meshry, Wasm Edge, and right now I'm also contributor to the one of the most recent AIML projects that has been sandboxed within the CNCF called GitOps, and it's an AML packaging software. So of course, I have really loved the entire chat backup loop of series a lot, and it's practically my first time actually venturing into Kubernetes security. Although we know that hardening and securing your Kubernetes cluster is one of the most important things, but generally I've always it has probably just happened matter of fact that I've never directly dived into any of the Kubernetes security tooling myself because my focus has always been more towards AIML and also with cloud native WebAssembly. So this is the first time that I'm actually trying out the Kubescape project, which has been in the CNCF for a while now, and I feel that considering that cloud native security is such a huge domain in itself. Being able to secure your Kubernetes clusters is extremely important. And I feel probably today, as I will also explore this particular project for the first time, hopefully the audience will also learn along the way. And if you're already not familiar with the overall structure of this entire series, it's a way for myself and the audience to just dive into the new CNCF project. So I have also personally never actually even touched Kubescape or even visited the website. This is the first time. Now I will be honest that I have been to a bunch of KubeCons and I've seen the project booth, but I never just happened to interact with the maintainers. Probably might have gone to the ARMO parties during KubeCon, but this is the first time. So should be fun. And I'll try to also run this locally and see how what we can learn throughout this entire 1 hour. So without further ado, let's get started. So I'm already on the Kubescape IO website, which has this really nice logo. So first of all, I think just to think about what we can learn from the logo, I think it's a very nice logo because it has this magnifying glass. So it at least tells us something that it will allow you to use the magnifying glass and look for issues in your Kubernetes cluster, considering that it's talking about security. So let's first just give a quick overview of what the Kubescape project is all about, just to kind of understand the fundamentals, and then we'll try to install it and try to run it with our Kubernetes clusters and see what actually works and what does not work. I have so just as a side note, like I have heard about the project at least via some of the community initiatives by other CNCF ambassadors like Sayam Patak, who runs his YouTube channel called Cube Simplify. So yes, I think he had covered a video about Kubescape, but that is like 3 years ago. So it should be good to at least like kind of revisit and see what is the overall why Kubernetes security is important. Because if I'm not mistaken, there was this one white paper around Kubernetes hardening, and I might just want to see that Kubernetes hardening guide, or there was like this white paper that was covered by the NSA, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, this one. It's pretty much like this NSA had created this Kubernetes hardening guide back in 2023, I guess, or 2021, where they talk about what are the things that one should do in order to ensure that your Kubernetes clusters are always secure. So they talk about, or the hardening guide basically describes the following: that you should always scan the container images and pods for vulnerabilities or misconfigurations, and run the containers and pods with the least privileges possible. And I feel that this particular point about the scanning of the container images for misconfigurations is actually very important, because let's say that you're creating a deployment YAML, and for some reason you're writing a pod configuration and you have not mentioned how much memory you want to attach to that particular pod, or like let's say if you're running a GPU, what type of runtime you want to use for the GPU. Like there could be some sort of minute misconfiguration issues in your cluster, and that could potentially lead to some issue, because if it's especially related to your cluster access or RBAC, it could be very critical. So that is, I think, like I really love this point where it says that run containers and pods with the least privileges possible, and use containers that have been built to run applications as non-root users, so that uh, if someone tries to attack your cluster, they don't get their root privileges. Because if they do get the root privilege, they can just go ahead and completely destroy your entire cluster, or can try to run some sort of unwanted application or workload that is not something that you would want to run. And run containers with immutable file systems as possible. And then I think that even this particular use case around having network separation to control the amount of damage a compromise might cause, this actually makes a lot of sense. And this includes locking down access to the control plane nodes and using separate networks for control plane and the nodes, and limiting access to the Kubernetes etcd server, and also configuring the components to use a TLS certificates to ensure they're authenticated. And I think apart from the authentication, actually at this particular point, which is RBAC, so which is like using strong authentication authorization to limit the user and the administrator access to limit the attack surface. Make sure to use anonymous login and create role-based access control policies that are unique to the infrastructure service. So I think a lot of really nice, valuable points that have been laid down by the guide, which not only cover that, okay, what should be the configuration of your pods, but also at your network layer, adding proper TLS configuration or TLS certificate on all of your nodes, like whether it's the control plane or your separate pods or the nodes that have any component running, and also adding like RBAC. So those are some of the key components or critical components which are associated with the cloud native security, or for Kubernetes specifically. But of course, there is like an entire course or a certification that you can do. I think it's called, a short form is CSA, which is the Cloud Native Security Associate. I might be a bit wrong, but of course, that in itself is a complete um, security app, security based certification that you can do with CNCF. So I'll highly also recommend checking that out. But let's dive back into Kubernetes. So as soon as I read the Kubernetes security, that particular white paper came back to my mind. So let's see what Kubescape does. So it says that Kubescape is an open source Kubernetes security platform that provides comprehensive security from left to right across the entire development and deployment cycle. And it offers hardening, posture management, and runtime security capabilities to ensure your Kubernetes environment protection. So that's great. It should be able to tell us a bunch of different things that it seems. So these are some of the key security features of Kubescape. So it offers to scan any misconfigurations as early as the manifest file submission stage, prompting a proactive approach to security. So as we were looking at this guide, which says that your hardening process should always look for the vulnerabilities in security, or vulnerabilities or misconfigurations for your pod. So I feel that uh, Kubescape pretty much does in being able to achieve that. That in case there are any misconfigurations that in our deployment or service, like our deployment YAML, it should be able to automatically scan that and tell us about that. So that's pretty nice feature. And then it also provides this runtime security. That means that it's not just going to be providing you security at the time when you're setting up your cluster or before you actually go into deployment and productionize your cluster. Even when you're running it in your runtime, it will provide you continuous monitoring. And what I can see is that it also has support for CI/CD, so which is great because in case you make some change in your YAML and you add it to a CI/CD platform, and before merging that into your production, you could potentially run Kubescapes. I'm not sure. So it says that it has a GitHub action. So I'm just curious to see if there is a GitHub action for Kubescape. So there should be one. Perfect. So the use case would be that if you were to use this particular Kubescape action, it would scan your YAML or any other thing within your cluster config to see whether there is any potential issue with respect to security, and it should automatically block that. So that's a really amazing feature if you want to ensure that someone from your team, from your SRE team, does not just directly push some un untested code, which could potentially lead to some security vulnerabilities for your cluster. And then it can scan your active cluster for misconfigurations and security issues. That's pretty good. And then it says multi-framework compliance support. So Kubescape can test against multiple frameworks like the CSA hardening guide. So I think like that's the guide that we were referring to, which is this NSA CISA Kubernetes guide. So it can test it against this framework or even the SOC2 or CIS benchmark. So that's a great thing that we can test our entire cluster against specific security frameworks, because as far as I understand that different organizations might want to adapt to different frameworks, or they might want to ensure that their cluster is compliant with all of the different hardening guides. So it's good that we are able to customize that, and we should try to test that out when we will probably try to install Kubescape. So that's a really lovely feature. And then we can also do YAML checks and Helm chart for correct configuration of the framework. That's really nice. And then it provides you hardening by ensuring proactive identification and rapid remediation of misconfigurations through manual, recurring, or event triggered scans. And then it provides security against multiple cloud providers and distributions. So, at least from a high level, I feel it provides a lot of value. And now, this is someone who does not completely understand all of the important aspects of how to make a more secure Kubernetes cluster. Of course, we are always learning that your YAML should be properly configured. And most of my time, I've actually personally done that, like focused on doing that. And usually, like some of the other teammates take care of doing the SRE bit of maintaining the cluster. So it's good that we are able to get so much flexibility and capabilities from a single project. So here is a quick demo, and it also says that it was created by ARMO. So yeah, I mean, I have visited the ARMO booth at KubeCons, and I've loved their parties. But it's good that I'm at least now understanding the project for the first time. So what you can see is that let's actually try to refresh the page and look at the demo from scratch. So it shows us that it's, I think, installing Kubescape. So we'll also do that. So it has installed. And then it's running a Kubescape scan command and providing a framework NSA. So it should probably test it against that NSA. So it's loading the scanner, and it gives us these bunch of severity, control plane, failed resources, excluded resources. So probably it might be something to do with the different types of scans it's probably doing. So looks pretty nice. And yeah, do remember to give the project a star. To get started, it says that you can experiment with Kubescape by installing this particular project. Now, probably like before we jump directly into it, I would like to at least understand like what actually happens under the hood, because at least you have understood that it's great for scanning of your project, and it is able to do like a bunch of different scans, at least what it seems from this demo GIF that they have shown. But we will come back to this particular part a bit. I would love to just dive a bit deeper into like just understanding how Kubescape is actually doing all of that. So it says that Kubescape can run in all of these different places. So it can run on code side, so on your YAML, and even with a Kubescape VS Code extension. That should be really interesting. I would love to at least try to see that. And then it can also run with CI/CD. It can run with continuous deployment with Argo and Jenkins, and then finally it can also run with deployment. So that looks pretty nice. And then let's see that what it's actually doing under the hood. So it says that the Kubescape uses Open Policy Agent to verify Kubernetes projects and against a library of posture controls. Let's see what these posture controls are. So contains the Cube, Kubescape uses for detecting misconfigurations in Kubernetes manifests. Okay, so I think what it's probably doing is because, to be honest, like I have tried Open Policy Agent project as well, but um, what I understand from the OPA project or the Open Policy Agent project is that you can define a certain set of configurations or policies, of course, against which you want to like then test something, right? So if the policies match, so for example, because I've not directly contributed to OPA, I have contributed to the project called Kyverno. So with Kyverno, you can basically set a policy, and and you have to set those certain policies for different projects. So I made a contribution during KubeCon to create a policy for HashiCorp console source mesh. So we had to define that, okay, there was some configuration that we had to do. And then when we run the policy, we see whether it actually runs against the policy, like whether it matches, right? So I think similarly, it might be doing, so Kubescape might be verifying your Kubernetes manifest files by running them against this policy. And you can see that it has the Rego library that contains how it should actually handle those misconfigurations. So we could probably try to dive deeper into this a bit later. But yeah, it says that it contains a library of security controls that codify Kubernetes best practices. And then Kubescape uses these controls to scan against running clusters or manifest files. Uh, and it is written in Rego, which is the purpose-built declarative policy. Okay, perfect. So you have a framework or a policy, and then Kubescape will scan your cluster or your manifest against these best practices or the policy and compare that whether it matches against it or not. So that's a really interesting implementation. And then, oh wow, this is nice. So it can also do image scanning. Um, so probably the image or the cluster or the container image that you're running, it can also scan that. So you could potentially search for some CVs, potentially, if I'm not mistaken. And then you can see that the results are printed in a console friendly manner, but could also be exported to JSON or PDF. So that looks pretty interesting. And then, of course, there is an open source community. You can go ahead and start the repo. It has more than 10,000 stars. And if you want to contribute, of course, with every project, there will always be a contributing file. But I think that being said, that looks good. We can probably jump into getting started with Kubescape. So here, first thing that we should probably follow is in how to install uh, Kubescape, and also running the scan and understanding the architecture. We'd love to go ahead and take a look at this in a bit. But let's see. So there is a getting started guide. We can probably follow this. This should also be there in the docs, if I'm not mistaken. So let's go ahead and take a look. So that's our documentation overview. And let's go to the getting started. Of course, nice. So in order to install Kubescape, we can just follow and run this curl command. Now, in order to do this, I do have a cluster, K3D cluster that I've been running. So I have this K3D cluster running installed, and let's try to go ahead and run this query. So let's install Kubescape. So while it's doing that, once we go ahead and install it, we should be able to run this Kubescape command. So just take a few seconds. And then what my understanding is that it should validate it against a cluster. So currently my kubeconfig is set against this K3D cluster that I have set up. So let's see if it is able to automatically capture that. So it says that it is already um, running the, okay, perfect. And if I want to now just see whether um, Kubescape is officially there or not, okay, so, or is it Kubescape? My bad. That is a typo. Oh wait. Let's see if I try to run this. It says Kubescape didn't install. Probably might have to do with. Okay, so let's see. So it already tried to scan this. Oh, sorry. Okay, I might have to export Kubescape. Um, Hopefully this should work. Oh, perfect. So it's saying that Kubescape scanner is initializing, and I think that's what it's trying to do now. That it's trying to run it against. Okay, let's see what did it do. So when we ran the command, it said that it initialized the scanner. It loaded the policies. So I feel that these policies might be coming from pretty much that Rego policies that we have defined. It might be coming from there. So it might be loading all of those policies. Um, so as it says that Kubescape started as a tool to validate a cluster against the NSA hardening guidance, and I think like this is the official framework for NSA, and you can see all of the supported frameworks that you can scan your cluster against, and it will start by checking how well your cluster and the workloads are configured, and then we should see a output similar to this. So let's see if we actually got something similar to this. Looks somewhat similar. Let's see, framework. Not exactly. We see controls failed 12 and passed 10. We also see that similarly, but I don't see necessarily like this table showing up. Probably could be somewhat different because of the version difference, I guess. But at least does tell us it does tell us that how many of these particular controls were passed and then how many were failed. So it tells you about all of this. But let's actually take a look at um, what this breakdown looks like. So if I go back, probably I can pull this up here. Then I'll just bring my right. So let's take a look here. So it tells us, if I scroll a bit to the top, so it tells us that in terms of the control, so this framework consists of 24 controls. It says that in this example, there were 12 that failed, which means that there is at least one object in the cluster that did not meet the requirements of the control, and then 10 control passed. In our case, we had a total of 25 controls in which 7 passed and 13 failed, and then 2 require configuration before they are evaluated. Okay. And then the output table tells us the severity level. So we see that there are 0 which are critical and then 13 which are high. Um, okay. And then it tells us the name of the control. So I think it's this one. Although I didn't see this particular table, Let's see, control name. Uh, okay, probably might be a bit different in terms of running this with the latest version, but it should at least on a high level tell us that what was that specific control name. So, for example, it here says about disable anonymous access to your kubelet service, and then enforce kubelet client TLS authentication. So it's probably like looking at your configuration YAML or the YAML, and then looking at all of your pods and the networks and trying to see whether it passes through that security policy that has been defined uh, by Kubescape, and then it can tell you the failed sources that caused a particular control to fail, and a control will be tested against every compatible resource in the cluster. So it should tell you on how many failed resources that particular control failed, and then finally it gives you the overall summary, the total number of resources that caused control failures, and you can also run by using verbose. So let's actually try to do that, because I feel we should try to understand this a bit further. So probably we can try to run the v command to also get a more verbose response, to see like, okay, what were those particular failed controls, why, what was the reason they might have failed. So hopefully we should get some additional details around the controls that failed and what was the reason for their failure. So let's go ahead and see this again. So we are running the scanner again, and this time we are able to see over here that, for example, for the kind service account, we have the controls which failed. So it tells you about the resource. In this case, it's the administrative role, and it also gives us some remediation steps. So actually, that's pretty neat, because, for example, if some of these particular controls fail for you and they might be of a critical severity level, it also tells you some remediation steps that you can follow. So in this case, you might want to look at your service account, and specifically for traffic, and ensure that you can fix these if it's possible. And then it tells us this one is related to a service account. This one is probably looking at our helm chart and showing us some of the severity level. For example, here it's showing us to ensure that the CPU limits are set and ensure the memory levels are set. And then it also gives us that how you can basically set these limits. So that's a really nice feature, and it goes deep into all of your service YAML, your deployment YAML files, and then also to your daemon set. So goes really deep into not just your configuration files, but also the entire cluster, right? So that is extremely verbose, and then it shows you the controls here and the severity level. So somewhat similar to what we saw, that what were the failed resources and all resources. So for example, in this case, I think like this one is probably a one to look at. Which one is um, the control name here is application credentials and configuration files, and it failed for this one specifically. So that appears to be really valuable information um, in order to scan this. Uh, and then it also says that this control is scanned exclusively by the Kubescape operator and not the Kubescape CLI. Install the Kubescape operator. So apparently, we have a way to also run the operator. Let's see like what. So yeah, it basically tells us that the total number of resources that have caused the control failures, and to view each one of the Kubescape suggestion on how to fix. So I think that's the remediation step. So if you look here, we got this verbose response, and it literally just went into each and every component of our cluster, and it told us what's the issue and then what is the remediation. So I think like I really like the one here which it tells for example, setting up your CPU value, your other set of values, and what you need to set in your YAML in order to fix those particular issues. Or perhaps it might not be in a YAML; it might be some leaked environment variables that you might have set probably. That could also be a potential issue depending on how your cluster has been set up. So that is really nice, the way that it gives us that verbose instruction. Now looking at the documentation, it looks like that we can run Kubescape both as a command line CLI, which we just did. So I think like this is the documentation that is pretty much showing you how to install Kubescape in different type of environments in Mac OS and all of the other environments. So we just try to actually run that. So I think we can probably move to the next one. The next one is installing it in your cluster. So that's actually very interesting that you could run Kubescape either as an external tool that leverages the tool, the CLI, to look at your cluster and monitor the status. But you could also actually run Kubescape as an individual pod. So it would run inside of your cluster and it would continuously monitor the status of the cluster. So that seems like a really interesting way to actually do that. So let's actually go ahead and install this hen chart, which will hopefully then when we run this command, we should be able to see the specific pods that are running in our cluster specific to Kubescape. So let's go ahead and install the hen chart. This is interesting because let's say that if you don't want to necessarily run the CLI, then at least you can directly run it as part of your pod. So let's take a look whether it actually installed. So I'll go ahead and run this command. So you can see that it is creating the container. So hopefully within a few minutes it should run. But that's pretty neat. Let's take a look further what else we can actually do with the operator. So we install the operator with Helm, and we can include the compliance and vulnerability management, or even export this data to an external provider. So that's actually very interesting that we can export all of this data to either, like, let's say a ARMO based cloud platform to easy. I think like the idea would be to visualize all of this in a more easier fashion, because a lot of times people might not be comfortable visualizing all of this to through the CLI. So they might want to have a UI where they can look at all the scans, and then so you have to just install this, and then if you want to scan the results, they will be so the scanning results will be available gradually as the scans are completed. Okay. Let's just verify if the installation has completed. So we are kind of getting a issue, pretty much in tune with the title of the live. But let's see what could be the issue. Um, there's some sort of an issue with the crash backup loop, specifically with the agent. So I feel like the agent that's trying to run Kubescape, there might be. But let's just try to run a scan again. I just want to see quickly whether it is able to give us all of the issues in our cluster. But we might have to try to see what's actually causing this crash loop back off. So we are in a chat loop back off, and we are getting a crash loop back off. We might have to cross check what's causing this particular crash loop back off, but we can probably explore that later. But the idea here is that we can be we can visualize these particular results with the help of a GUI. Let's actually look at this headlamp integration and this ARMO integration, because I feel that they should give us a much better view of looking at the cluster. So follow the standard operator installation and try to run this. So let's try to see if we are able to get headlamp integration. Um, so you need to follow this over here and ensure that we have set the capabilities of continuous scan, which is enabled, and network observability. Let's see if that was set up. You might just want to do that. Looks like the continuous, you might just want to also then run the same command probably again, and also add continuous observability. So we'll just add this other part, which is observability, which might be required for viewing this with the help of a GUI based system. So I'll go back and also add this other flag. Oh, I think it kicked off. So we can just go ahead and run this now. I think I turned on the agent mode in warp. We can probably close this. Yeah. Oh, my bad. Just copy this entire command and let's see if we are able to also get the capabilities for observability. We'll just update this. Okay. Now let's take a look at the summaries. If you are able to scan some, we get does not have a source type. Okay. And then if you want to look at detailed reports, vulnerability metrics, that's bit strange. Probably it might be because of the crash loop back off. Um, I just want to see what is the cause of this issue. Mm, So if we take a look at the logs for just this particular pod, um, it says no container runtime can be monitored with this thing. Does not necessarily give us any issue as such, but you can probably go back to that later. For now, if this seems a bit difficult, like if this is failing, you could try to run. Um, we could try to run the ARMO platform once and see if we're able to. So I guess we might have to set up um, ARMO. There should be like an integration here that probably talks about the cluster. So installing this in your cluster. So that is what we saw. We can probably look at that a bit later, but let's see. So if you want to now view the results, you can look at the compliance scanning. Okay, yeah, I don't think so. It's probably because of that pod that's failing. I do have another Kubernetes cluster on which I could try to run this. So this is like a K3s. If I just take a look at my pods with namespace, I think here at least everything is running. So I could try to see workloads. Okay, um, the particular namespace. And so it does not show me anything right now. Um, what could be the reason? Let's see. So if I go back, we would want to run this with. So if I just probably go back to the headlamp integration once, so ensure that we have set this capability. I'd like to just probably run this hen chart again with. Let's see. So once it. Okay. Um, let's just ensure that the pods are running. Okay, perfect. Let's go ahead and now try to see whether we are able to get this UI. So we need to install the headlamp. Oh, okay. But then we'll need to have a GUI tool. Okay. We could probably come back to this later, or we could later on try to also use ARMO, because it seems that there is a ARMO integration as well. So we could ideally see it with that. Um, but yeah, installing it in the cluster, if we go a bit further, you could do like network analysis, network policy analysis as well, or generate policies with it, upgrading to a new version. And if you want to uninstall, then you can just do an Helm uninstall Kubescape. Probably what I might want to do is, just for the sake of seeing whether it was something to do with an improper installation, I would just try uninstalling Kubescape and rerunning the install. Hopefully, that could get it to fix. So let's see if this works out somehow. Okay. If I just go ahead and take a look at my current pods, so I think it's still terminating. So you should probably try to run this namespace. Okay, perfect. So it looks like we have uninstalled it, and then we try to run the Helm chart installation again with, let's see. Hopefully it runs this time, so that at least we can get to see the pods. And okay, so at least this time it ran the storage agent, but the node agent is still failing. Oh, actually, this time, the same. Both the node agents are failing. That's a bit of weird issue. But anyways, I think we can proceed further. So you can, of course, as you saw, that you can either install Kubescape as a client and run that. Probably that's probably better for me, because I feel like the operator is giving some sort of an issue. And again, like, this is a chat loop back off. So of course, if we don't have issues, then it would look like that it's a scripted show, which is it's clearly not. But we can proceed further. So you can do a bunch of different things that, as it basically shows you, that you can run different types of configurations, as we saw over here, when you are installing the Kubescape operator. And you can do different types of scannings, which is things like compliance scanning, image vulnerability scanning, network policy generation. And I think it's a good time to just quickly look at the Kubescape. So that's our first scan that we had run, and this shows basically your usage. If you want to change between the different frameworks, then we can also try to do that. So we'll try to use just the Kubescape command directly. But let's just take a look at the architecture. I just wanted to quickly take a look at what is actually doing here. So here we have the component architecture and the CLI and the operator, right? So let's take a look at the component architecture, and look at what it's trying to do. So here we have Kubescape, and here it's taking the look at the CMD and HTTP and all of the Kate's API. So it shows you the configurations which it's getting. So these are all of the configurations that it has defined, which I feel is coming from this repo. And then we have the objects against which it will actually test the configuration and the controls. So here we are getting it from the host, where there will also be the image vulnerabilities, and then of course the main Kubernetes cluster itself. And then the process would be that it tests all of these different resources and the images against the OPA based policies. And in case they pass, then it passes well. And then if it fails, then it will aggregate all of these and give you the final result. So it looks fairly straightforward, that it takes a look at every single resource, whether it's pod or your policies, your network policies, and then it aggregates and runs these preset number of policies. And these will also be defined by the framework, like it's whether it's the NSA framework or the Mitra framework, all of these different ones. And in the CLI, you can see over here that under the hood, it's running the OPA engine, from where it's getting the Rego policy. and it can run it to look at what policies are being or what controls are passing and which controls are failing based on the policy that you have defined. So that looks pretty neat. We can probably stick to this particular getting started guide. I think it looks a bit easier to at least try to run it with the Kubescape command. So we initially ran it with the NSA framework. If we try to run the same against the same cluster, if you try to run with the Mitre framework, so if you remember, with NSA framework, I think we had a total of 7 passes and 13 fails. Let's see if we get a similar type of result here with the other framework, because I feel there might be some changes. So we have 713, and yeah, this time you can see that the number of passes and fails have actually changed. And I feel, again, depending on the type of framework that you go ahead and decide with, ultimately they have different considerations when it comes to security. So if you were to just compare between the two, uh, I feel they might have some differences when it comes to the guide. That what are the key takeaways from the guide is what I understand. And if you want to scan a particular control, you can look at the control name. So we had this control name. Let's try to see if we are able to run it against this control name. So we could try to copy audit logs enabled. And now if you want to run it, so it would be cube scan control. So cube scan. So let's see. So it's Kubescape, sorry. Then control. Okay. Although, yeah, that might be the control ID. Would control name be taken up like this? Let's see. Kubescape control, and then trying to be verbose. I hope that's the, yeah, control. If you were to look at the control IDs, you might have to go a bit further up and see probably like the verbose resources. Okay, it doesn't look like we got the control IDs. Um, Not found. Yeah, that's so. If I want to list the available controls, let's see. Let's try to run the list of controls that we have right now. Seems like you can then go to individual control. So that's good that we got one of the control IDs. I can close this and try to now run it against the specific control. So it's good thing that we get that granular control in order to scan specific control IDs and explore them further. So for example, if one of the control IDs against it you have a severe issue, then you can go ahead and do that. Okay, so it seems C00 still, or we could try to also, so we can basically scan like a specific control. It says that no resources scan, that's fine. But then you can also scan kubeconfig files. If you have another one, you can also exclude certain namespaces if that might be use case, or if you want to just like scan like a local YAML file. um, so we could actually try to create like a fake, actually let's go to ChatGPT and let's try to ask it, give me a deployment YAML, um, Kubernetes or YAML file for Kubernetes with intentionally wrong config. Let's see if it is able to capture this. So with intentionally incorrect data. So we could try to make like a quick YAML and define whether it is automatically able to capture the issues with that particular YAML. This should be fun to try it out. Let's see. So I'll just go ahead and create a new um, deployment.yaml. Okay. Just let's see if we got the YAML. Perfect. Now let's go back to the documentation. And if you want to scan, you can scan the YAML file. So I can just say that kubescan deployment.yaml. So ideally it should tell us that the spec replica, all these are an issue. And the great thing is that, so, okay, let's see. So it scanned our security posture resource. Okay. It gave us the overall overview. So not necessarily from an incorrect perspective, but from a security perspective, which actually makes sense. It's not it's not telling you that your YAML is incorrect, like from a syntax point of view. But if it feels that there is a vulnerability that might cause some sort of security issue, then I guess it might give you, it might be able to tell you. So um, probably what I can ask it to do is, so from a security perspective, to test with Kubescape. Probably this should have been a proper prompt, and see if it can test it out. So in this case, I feel it might be, for example, if you have a container, you have not probably given the container port number, or probably like the security policy is that you have given access to non-root user. Could be possible that you have done something along those lines. So let's try to actually remove our deployment.yaml and create another one. So I'll go ahead and add this over here, and let's try to run the scan again. Hopefully this time, if it's doing what I think it's doing, ideally this time it should be able to point out those similar type of issues with, specifically with the YAML. Yeah. So I think, yeah, this time it definitely gave me more issues. So it gave me hosts, non-root containers, and privileged containers. So yeah, it is able to give you, and probably if I give it um, a verbose based, uh, if I want it to be more verbose, probably I can also do that. So this time it is able to correctly identify the control name against this YAML, because yes, it had given privileges to non-root users, and that is a security vulnerability. So that actually makes sense. So that's good to know that you can also run it on individual YAML files and scan those, and you can also scan Kubernetes manifest files with a GitHub repository and exceptions, and you can scan Helm charts. So you see that it is such a powerful tool that you can scan so many different things, not just your K8s cluster, but if you have a GitHub repository. And I mean, today, honestly, we didn't even get time to explore the integrations. But you can now have this now run as a background service with your CI/CD tool like GitHub Action, or GitHub or GitLab Action, or GitLab CI, and automatically see whether there are some critical issues related to your. And what I've come to understand is that you can actually also define your own framework. You don't have to necessarily follow just the NSA or the other frameworks that we saw. You can define it against your own set of frameworks, and then run the scanning. So it will always run that. And here you can see that it's trying to run that with the. So we have all of these, and then you can also run it with the controller, or the on your operator. So you can run it with the operator, and then looks like that everything else is pretty much there. uh, in the end, you can also actually run it with your VS Code extension. I would definitely like to try this out, because I feel that there is a scenario where this would work really well with a VS Code extension. So let's try to see that VS Code extension once. For that, I'll just quickly open up a new instance of VS Code, and probably try to open up that same deployment YAML and see if we are able to see that. Okay, so let me go ahead and open up like a new. I would actually just go ahead and create a new window, and okay, perfect. Just create a new window, and install the Kubescape VS Code extension. So it has been installed now. So I guess it's this one. No, that's from self. But you should be able to now see that. Let's see. So you can scan YAML files and get analysis from Kubescape. That means you can scan using a command, or you could also scan it with the VS Code problems tab. That's really nice. So if you have a file, so let's actually open up that folder that we just created. So this deployment.yaml file. And if I just open up the terminal here, problem section, so far, I don't think so we have seen any problems, but at least it says that you can scan YAML directly with the help. So you can access, can be scanned using a command. So it would be, and then typing in the command name. Okay, so Control Shift P, and then I say Kubescape scan YAML. Oh, that's a bit strange with respect to. So requirements would be to download the latest Kubescape version. So it should be in the path. Oh, could be possible that you might have to add it to the path. You might have to follow one of these previous commands which had added Kubescape to our path. So I'll just try to run this again in the terminal. And hopefully now, if I run Kubescape, okay, so perfect. Let's go ahead and now run the Kubescape command again. Okay, I mean, again, live coding, live issues. But the idea here is, as it says, that when you are actually trying to scan cube your YAML, it would automatically show you in the problems tab. So it should, if it was working correctly, and I might have to, because we are running out of time, so I might have to try this out later. But you should be able to also scan it. And finally, one thing I would like to see is that if I want to see it with the help of UI, so we didn't really get to look at all of these things. Like we can also scan for vulnerabilities. We can look at some runtime threat detection with the help of Kubescape, which seems really interesting. If you want to harden a new cluster, then you can deploy, and they have like a pod here, and then they have deployed the pod, and they're using the Kubescape CLI to run the scan. And you can also actually remediate, because it tells you that how you can remediate that particular policy once you have scanned it, how you can fix it. So that is a really interesting way to automatically identify key issues and then be able to fix them, because Kubescape is giving you the information that how you should fix a potential issue that you might have found with one of the controls. So that is one of the most interesting aspects here. But if you look at the integrations quickly, looks like that's a blank page. Okay, let's take a look at the frameworks. For some reason, the overview page seems to be empty. That we might have to create an open source issue for that. Looks a bit weird. But let's go ahead and just create a new ARMO. Hopefully, this might be fairly straightforward. But if we are just creating a new account, misclicked. Let me try to use another account. Let's see if we are able to get. So, oh, only work emails are up. Anyways, looks like
We're close. We're out of
UI
time.
wise, we might have to try again.
Yeah. All right. So
Yeah.
we'll see everyone next week.
Oh my God.
You have the last word if you
Yep.
want to say goodbye.
No, I think like so as you saw that when it comes to being able to use a tool that can give you the granular level of control when it comes to scanning for potential issues with your YAML, with your cluster, with the pods, with the TLS. I mean, we didn't really just get enough time today to explore all of that, but you can see that we can do things like vulnerability scanning, continuous scanning of your, but we personally tested it out on running it on just the cluster and an example with a YAML file. So we were still able to like run it with two different types of scans, but you can do bunch of other different type of scans, and you can also remediate, as you saw, with very verbose descriptions of what's the issue and how you should actually fix it. So I think like from that perspective, it gives you really nice granular control over. From a security perspective, and I feel that that's one of the best parts about this as a tool. And of course, this was a live first time trying it out. Some things didn't work out. I would personally love, I really loved the VS Code extension, at least from the high-level overview, that you can get real-time description of the issues even before you actually put it into production. So that gives you like a really good developer experience to be able to fix the issues in your YAML directly before you proceed with publishing it onto your production application. So yeah, I think overall it was a really nice experience trying out Kubescape. I think it is such a nice implementation of using an existing cloud native project like Open Policy Agent. As we know that Open Policy Agent is a very mature project at this point in time, but it uses it in a really nice manner to be able to test it against a certain set of policies. So I feel like I learned a lot today, and hopefully other folks might have also been able to at least understand what Kubescape does. And we will be back next week for the next episode. So thank you so much, George.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see everyone next week.